My name is Ulrike Protzer. I'm a professor for virology at the Technical University in Munich, and I'm director of the Institute of Virology at the Helmholtz Center in Munich and also at the Technical University.
Thank you. Here at the International HBV Meeting, today you chaired a session on targets for therapy, correct?
I did chair the session on targets for therapy, and particularly on preclinical results, which discover those targets, but also test whether they are suited for therapy.
So that's a long way from animal or human trials.
That is quite a bit of a way until such a target will lead to a compound, and the compound can be used and brought into the clinics. Usually it's like 5 to 10 years.
Yes. What's the state of the pipeline? Is there a lot of activity? Is it a fuller pipeline than it was 5 or 10 years ago?
Luckily, the pipeline is quite well filled in the meantime. It was really empty 10 years ago, and about 5 years ago, companies started to come back into HBV, and unfortunately, these types of efforts are always company driven because they cost a lot of money. If you want to do clinical trials, it just costs a lot of money. So you need at least smaller companies who can raise money, who can raise funds and do that. But nowadays, I'm a lot more positive because there is a lot of different approaches going into the clinics, being that directly acting antivirals, so really fighting directly the virus, or also approaches stimulating the immune system, then to finally fight the virus.
That's encouraging. And I was reading, there's a little debate going on about the definition of a functional cure and where that fits into the conversation about future therapies. What's your opinion?
The functional cure is sort of a definition which we made a few years ago in a consensus conference, because a real cure, so getting 100% of rid of every little tiny bit of the virus, is very, very hard. So people said we should maybe reach what the natural immunity reaches, and that's a functional cure. You may still have a few hidden virus copies in your liver, but they don't really matter because they don't make you ill. And that's why this functional cure idea came up.
I see. Are the most promising therapies what I would call, as a layman, dual therapies, where it's a combination of drugs?
I think we will need a combination. I mean, we know that from most viral diseases or antivirals that a single component cannot do it, that it really needs two components. And in HBV, it may not even be sufficient to combine two antivirals, but I'm convinced that we will have to use an antiviral and combine that with something which stimulates the immune system in order not to do a very long therapy as we have to do at the moment with NUCs. That's an antiviral which we already have.
Right.
But we want to have something which allows you to take off these drugs. And I think we need the immune system for that.
That makes perfect sense. Tomorrow you're speaking about therapeutic vaccines, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That is almost just a contradiction in terms almost, or to the lay audience, the concept of vaccines is not something that's therapeutic, it's preventative. So could you explain that?
That's definitely true. Normally when we talk about a vaccine, we think it's something that builds up an immunity wall and prevents an infection or prevents a disease. Now, such a preventive vaccine already exists for Hep B. Unfortunately, those who already carry the virus, those who are chronically infected, they don't have any advantage of this vaccine anymore. It's more for those who have not been infected, have not been in contact with the virus. And a therapeutic vaccine is tailored for those who carry the virus, so for those who suffer from chronic hepatitis B. And the idea is to achieve what naturally, sometimes, in very rare cases, only 0.5% of the cases, natural immunity can achieve, that it can kick out the virus of the body and can control the infection. And we think if we well enough understand how that natural immunity works, and we find something which really then induces the same type of natural immunity, we could reach that not only for those 0.5%, but hopefully for 50, 60, 70, or even more percent of people.
That's interesting. Do you look at people who've never become chronically ill from hepatitis B to understand how the human immune system works with the virus?
There is studies which look at people who get the infection and are able to clear it, to cure the virus spontaneously, because from those we can learn which arms of the immune system need to be activated. Yes. And we already know it's different arms.
I see.
It's the B cells which produce antibodies. That's why then they turn anti-S positive and lose the S.
Oh,
so
right. That's what you're measuring and then testing for positivity.
Yeah, that's what you can measure in the blood. But we also know that they developed T cell responses. That's these immune cells which circulate your body and really scan whether there is an infected cell. And people who can cure the infection, they have those T cells. But patients who are chronically infected, they have almost none of those. So what we think is a clue to really induce the right type of immune response and a balanced immune response that then really gives a really good defense and wall of immunity.
That's interesting. What's your personal research interest?
Well, personally, I'm driven by finding a cure against HBV already since many, many years.
Yes.
And as we are convinced that antivirals per se cannot do it, we are looking into different kinds of immune therapy or options to stimulate the immune system. And we tested all of those. We tested antibody-based therapies, we tested T-cell therapies, and we are testing therapeutic vaccines.
How did you get into focusing on hepatitis B?
Basically, I worked in the clinics after having done my exam, and I saw quite a few patients really severely ill, suffering from chronic hepatitis B, having developed liver cirrhosis, dying from that disease. And then interferon therapy came up. That was the very early times of interferon therapy. Yes. And we saw some responses and we saw some success. It was not very often and the therapy was not well tolerated, but there was some success. And so I thought, well, I really have to understand that. Why is there a response in these few and there's none in the others?
Mm-hmm.
Can we find anything better? Can we understand how that virus manages to persist in the body for such a long time, not being recognized by the immune system, not being kicked out? And that's why I started this area of research.
I should know, but I didn't ask you before we started. Do you still see patients?
Very rarely, because I saw patients for like 7 years working in the clinics, working in hepatology department, infectious diseases. And then I switched into virology, and virology means if you're working as an MD in virology, you do diagnostics. So we get all the patient samples sent in and we analyze them. Is there a virus infection?
Right.
Not only hepatitis B, also SARS coronavirus or influenza or herpes or whatever.
I see. What's the message you think that people living with hepatitis B and their caregivers and loved ones should hear coming out of this conference?
That a lot of people are really working very, very hard, and they're putting all their efforts and all their hard blood into
Yes.
finding a cure, but we still don't have it. So I think it would be unfair to promise to somebody we'll have a cure in 2 or 3 years, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
But be ensured that we work really hard to get that. And it's 345 people who were here, had a very, very productive exchange, and they will bring the messages into the world, back into their labs, back to their trainees. So it's many, many more who can profit from what we've discussed and what we've learned.
From all over the country. I mean, all over the world.
From all over the world, all over France, all over Europe, Asia, even Asian people were here, although it's a little hard to travel for them. A lot of Americans, some Africans, so really all over the world.
Thank you so much for talking with us, Dr. Protzer.
You're very welcome.